The morning of August 11th, 1940, began like so many others during the height of the Battle of Britain. Gray skies, the hum of engines over southern England, and the restless anticipation of another day's fight for survival. But for the men of No. 85 Squadron, Royal Air Force, this patrol would become one of the war's great unsolved mysteries. By the end of that day, an entire flight of Hurricanes would vanish over the English Channel, leaving behind only questions, rumors, and a haunting final transmission. Engaging heavy cloud cover. Based at RAF Martlesham Heath in Suffolk, No. 85 Squadron was a seasoned unit. Under the leadership of squadron leader Peter Townsend, a name later made famous for other reasons, the squadron had already seen heavy action intercepting Luftwaffe bombers streaming toward London. Their aircraft, Hawker Hurricanes with olive-green camouflage and yellow-ringed roundels, were the backbone of Britain's defense. But this morning's mission was different: routine patrol over the Channel to monitor reported enemy movements near Calais. It sounded simple. Too simple, as one ground crewman later recalled. At 8:15 hours, 6 Hurricanes lifted off into the thick, damp air, their propellers slicing through the mist as they climbed to 15,000 feet. Radio chatter was brief, disciplined, and calm. They were last tracked by radar, crossing the coast near Dover. The channel below was calm that morning, a deceptive mirror masking the dangers that lurked beneath. The pilots joked over the wireless about breakfast left uneaten, small talk before the storm. By 8:40, the squadron was somewhere between Folkestone and Cap Gris-Nez when the first sign of trouble came through Fighter Command's listening post at Hawkinge. Control, 85 Squadron, engaging, heavy cloud cover, visibility poor. Then silence. Radar contact flickered, then vanished entirely. The blips that marked their position simply disappeared from the screen, swallowed by static. Controllers assumed a communications fault common in those days. But as the minutes turned into hours, unease spread across the operations room. Back at Martlesham Heath, mechanics kept the tea hot and eyes on the horizon. When the aircraft failed to return by midday, a search and rescue operation was launched. RAF Walmer dispatched a pair of Lysander reconnaissance aircraft, and Royal Navy patrol boats combed the sea lanes. Nothing. No oil slicks, no debris, no parachutes. Nothing but an unbroken expanse of gray water and uncertainty. The official report later described it as lost due to operational circumstances, cause unknown. But among the men on base, whispers began: radar malfunction, enemy deception, even sabotage. Flight Sergeant Robert Bobby Mills, a fellow pilot grounded that day due to engine trouble, later wrote in his diary, "We've lost men before, but never like this. Not one trace. It's as if the channel itself swallowed them whole." His words captured what many in Fighter Command felt, a sense that something beyond ordinary combat had occurred. To understand their fear, one must remember the conditions of 1940. Britain stood alone. The Luftwaffe's dominance over northern France meant every patrol across the Channel risked interception. The RAF relied on fragile early warning radar systems, cutting-edge but experimental. Weather forecasting was crude, and the line between clear skies and lethal fog could shift in minutes. Pilots flew by compass and instinct, their lives hanging on instruments that often betrayed them. Historians later noted that the day's weather report did, in fact, record a sudden storm formation over the Channel around the time of the squadron's disappearance. But the curious part was that no other units in the area reported such a storm. Meteorological logs from nearby stations contradicted each other, suggesting localized interference or perhaps human error in the rush of wartime reporting. Was it weather, then, that doomed No. 85 Squadron's flight? Or was it something more? The squadron's mission orders, later declassified, mention only standard patrol procedures. Yet margins in the logbook contain a strange notation: special coordination test, channel intercept. Some historians believe this hinted at an early radar guidance experiment, one designed to test the link between ground control and airborne units. If true, the pilots may have been navigating not by sight, but by experimental radio signals, signals that could have failed at the worst possible moment. In hindsight, their fate speaks to the cost of innovation in wartime. Britain's survival depended on desperate ingenuity, on untested ideas turned into action overnight. As one RAF officer wrote in a post-war memoir, "In 1940, we didn't have the luxury of certainty. Every mission was an experiment in staying alive." Even today, pilots and historians debate what happened that morning. Did they fly too low into fog, disoriented by faulty instruments? Were they ambushed by Luftwaffe fighters unseen on radar? Or were they diverted on a classified mission, never meant to appear in the record books? As the sun set on that August day, the names of 6 missing pilots were quietly added to the roll of the fallen. Families were notified with carefully worded telegrams. Missing in action, presumed lost. At Martlesham Heath, Townsend reportedly stood silent on the tarmac as the squadron's empty dispersal bays grew darker with each passing hour. There was no closure, no wreckage to bury, no explanation to grasp. Only questions that deepened as the war went on. And somewhere over the endless gray waters of the Channel, the echoes of those missing hurricanes seemed to linger, haunting reminders of a patrol that never returned. The mystery had begun. The search for the missing hurricanes began before dawn on August 12, 1940. The Channel was calm that morning, a deceptive stillness that belied the urgency in every radio transmission. From the cliffs of Dover to the beaches of Boulogne, Allied patrols scoured the horizon for any sign of the lost squadron. Nothing. Not a single floating wingtip, not an oil slick, not even the glint of a life raft. It was as if the 6 aircraft had been erased from existence. RAF Coastal Command quickly mobilized search and rescue operations. Avro Anson reconnaissance planes flew grid patterns across the Channel, while Royal Navy vessels, the HMS Sheldrake and the trawler HMT Agate, joined the hunt. Reports came in from French fishermen claiming to have seen British planes diving into cloud. But when investigators followed up, the witnesses disagreed on both time and location. By nightfall, after 12 hours of searching, the rescue teams returned empty-handed. At RAF Martlesham Heath, unease spread like a fog through the base. Pilots were used to loss. Every week brought funerals, but vanishing without a trace was different. There was a grim comfort in wreckage. It offered proof, something to bury. Here, there was only silence. Squadron leader Peter Townsend convened a debriefing with Fighter Command. They were trained men, disciplined pilots, he told Air Vice Marshal Keith Park. They don't just disappear. Park reportedly paused before replying, "Sometimes, Peter, the Channel takes more than we can explain." Radar operators at RAF Hawkins reviewed their logs, desperate for clues. The records showed no German aircraft in the vicinity at the time of disappearance. No enemy contacts, no anti-aircraft fire from the French coast. Nothing. Yet one operator recalled an odd anomaly, a wave distortion on the radar screen moments before the squadron vanished. It was dismissed as static interference at the time. Years later, experts suggested it might have been a reflection caused by intense atmospheric conditions, a phenomenon known as ducting, capable of making radar blips vanish or appear miles from their true location. Among the ground crew, rumors filled the void of official answers. Some whispered that the pilots had been lured off course by false radio signals, possibly a new form of German electronic warfare. Others suspected an unauthorized test flight connected to radar calibration, something higher command refused to discuss. Flight mechanic James "Jimmy" Hurst later wrote in a letter to his brother, "They told us it was weather, but no one believes that here. It's as if those birds flew into another world, one they didn't come back from." The human cost became clearer in the days that followed. Families received telegrams bearing the cold phrase, "Missing in action." One mother, Mrs. Evelyn Price of Kent, wrote to the Air Ministry asking for details of her son's final moments. The reply she received was brief, too brief. No confirmed sightings or wreckage. Cause undetermined. She kept the letter folded in her Bible for the rest of her life. Historians later uncovered inconsistencies in the official report. The search grid used by the Royal Navy was based on coordinates that, according to radar data, were 20 miles off the squadron's last known position. Whether this was due to clerical error or deliberate misdirection remains unclear. Some researchers suspect the mission's true purpose was not to patrol but to test new communication protocols for the chain-home radar system, the very backbone of Britain's early warning network. If so, the entire flight may have been classified from the start. A declassified memo from 1946 sheds faint light on this theory. It refers to unaccounted flight losses during field trials of control vectoring and recommends that such tests be strictly confined to home airspace. Though the document never names number 85 Squadron directly, the timing and circumstances align. Could it be that these pilots were part of a secret test gone tragically wrong, one that had to be buried beneath official silence? The mystery deepened when word spread that a separate RAF patrol, operating 30 miles north of the disappearance zone, reported hearing faint distress signals on the same frequency used by number 85 Squadron. The calls lasted only seconds, distorted and incomplete, Low on fuel. Can't see coast bearing. The rest was static. The source could never be traced. The tension of those days lingered long after the search was called off. It's the waiting that kills you, Townsend later wrote. Fighting gives you purpose. Waiting gives you ghosts. His words spoke for every man who watched the empty dispersal bays, the vacant bunks, the untouched mugs of tea in the squadron mess. 6 comrades gone, not to enemy fire, but to an absence no one could explain. For the Air Ministry, the case was closed. Operational loss due to adverse weather and disorientation, but among the pilots, the story refused to fade. Even years later, whenever someone mentioned the Channel patrols of 1940, someone would inevitably say, "You mean the ones who never came back?" And somewhere off the English coast, the waves rolled on, silent, indifferent, concealing their secret beneath 50 fathoms of cold salt water. By late 1940, as the Battle of Britain gave way to the long shadow of the Blitz, the mystery of No. 85 Squadron's disappearance had become little more than a quiet entry in an RAF ledger. Missing, presumed lost. Yet behind closed doors, within the windowless rooms of Fighter Command headquarters at Bentley Priory, the case was far from forgotten. Buried in stacks of after-action reports and radar analysis memos lay a single red-stamped file, classified experimental mission. In the aftermath of the loss, senior officers began to notice discrepancies in the official paperwork. The patrol's flight plan didn't match the one filed at Martlesham Heath. The coordinates sent to the radar stations were slightly altered, shifted 10 miles south. To the casual observer, it looked like a clerical mistake. But to the few in the know, it hinted at something more, a mission that was never meant to appear on public record. By November 1940, the Air Ministry quietly reassigned several officers connected to the case to an obscure program known as Operation Quiver. Officially, Quiver was described as a radar calibration project, an effort to test the coordination between airborne units and ground-based radar stations. Unofficially, it represented one of Britain's most daring wartime experiments, the attempt to link radar intelligence directly with fighter control in real time, guiding pilots to unseen targets through voice transmission alone. It was new, dangerous, and deeply secret. The concept was revolutionary. If successful, it would give RAF fighters the ability to intercept German aircraft in darkness or cloud, conditions the Luftwaffe was increasingly exploiting. But to make it work, aircraft had to operate under strict radio silence, testing unproven frequencies and experimental transmitters. The risk was immense. Radio signals could fail, instruments could malfunction, and without visual bearings, a pilot could easily become lost over the channel's endless gray expanse. It's like flying blind, one test pilot later recalled. Trusting the voice in your ear more than your own eyes. There were hints that No. 85 Squadron had been selected for one such trial, perhaps even without the full knowledge of all its pilots. Squadron leader Townsend's personal logbook for August 1940 contained a cryptic note on the day of the disappearance. New orders, revised route, verify link with the chain home array. The chain home system was Britain's cutting-edge early warning radar network, stretching along the coast from Dover to the Firth of Forth. Its operators were learning to direct pilots using radar echoes alone. But the system was still prone to interference, especially when atmospheric conditions distorted signals. A passage from the diary of Flight Sergeant Bobby Mills, written weeks before the mission, offers a glimpse into the mindset of the men involved. They say this new control method will save lives. I wonder if it will cost a few first. His words would prove prophetic. When the experiment went wrong, if it truly was part of Quiver, the Air Ministry had every reason to bury it. Britain was in the midst of its gravest crisis. Public confidence in the RAF was vital, and admitting that an entire flight might have been lost due to experimental communications failure was unthinkable. So, the story was quietly rewritten. The official report cited adverse weather conditions and loss of visibility. The real reason, whatever it was, disappeared beneath layers of wartime secrecy. Years later, after the war, a former radar technician named Albert Grant claimed he had been stationed at the Dover Chain Home Station that morning. In a 1963 interview, he recalled a strange interference spike just before the squadron's blips vanished. It wasn't normal static, he said. The readings went wild, like something was jamming the set, but it wasn't the Germans. It came from our side. His statement, dismissed at the time, now stands as one of the few first-hand clues hinting at a technical failure, or perhaps a system overload during testing. It's difficult, even now, to separate fact from deliberate omission. Wartime Britain was a labyrinth of compartmentalized information. Pilots, controllers, and technicians each knew only fragments of the whole operation. This secrecy kept the nation safe, but it also ensured that when something went wrong, truth was often the first casualty. The truth in war, historian Max Hastings once wrote, is not what happened, but what could be admitted. For modern readers, the lesson resonates far beyond 1940. Innovation under pressure, whether in war, science, or politics, always carries unseen risks. In times of crisis, bold ideas can save nations, but they can also cost lives in silence. The men of No. 85 Squadron may have paid that price. As 1941 dawned, the RAF continued to evolve its radar control system, eventually perfecting the methods that would lead to victory in the skies. Yet within the archives, their file remained sealed, its pages stamped top secret. And somewhere beneath the cold waters of the Channel, 6 hurricanes rested, silent witnesses to an experiment that had changed the course of air warfare forever. The official line still read, "Cause unknown." But among those who knew better, another phrase was whispered, half in guilt and half in reverence. They didn't disappear. They were sacrificed to progress. The Channel kept it secret, and the war moved on. But decades later, a chance discovery off the coast of Dieppe would drag the mystery of No. 85 Squadron back into the light. It was the summer of 1978 when a French trawler, La Marianne, working off the coast of Dieppe, hauled up something unexpected in its nets. Tangled among seaweed and shells were fragments of corroded metal, sections of fuselage painted in faint, fading RAF green. The fishermen at first thought they'd snagged part of a sunken ship, but when one of them spotted the unmistakable shape of a .303 Browning machine gun mount, they called the authorities. Within weeks, the debris was confirmed, a British Hurricane lost sometime during the Battle of Britain. What puzzled investigators wasn't that they'd found a wreck, it was what they didn't find. The serial numbers on the fuselage had been deliberately filed off, the data plate removed, and key identifying features stripped. The RAF maintained no record of any aircraft lost in that exact area. It should have been routine, recover, identify, archive, but the more they looked, the stranger it became. British and French naval divers conducted a follow-up search at the coordinates provided by the trawler. They found a small debris field scattered over the seabed, suggesting a mid-air breakup or a controlled ditching. Among the wreckage was a fragment of an oxygen regulator and a bent section of an aircraft identification plate, its numbers partially legible, P3. That prefix matched a production series of Hurricanes delivered to No. 85 Squadron in early 1940. News of the find reached Britain's Ministry of Defense within days. The response was swift and unusually secretive. French salvage teams were ordered to halt operations. British officials arrived at Dieppe under diplomatic pretense, quietly collecting all recovered material and transporting it back to the UK. When local journalists inquired, they were told the wreck was being repatriated for archival purposes. No follow-up statement was ever released. To those who knew their history, the implications were immediate. Could this be part of the squadron lost over the Channel nearly 40 years before? Aviation historians like Dr. Leonard Harris from Cambridge thought so. The coordinates match almost perfectly with their last known vector, he said in a 1979 interview. If confirmed, it could finally close one of the RAF's most enduring mysteries. But others weren't so sure. When Harris requested access to the debris for research, his application was denied. National security, the reply read. Ongoing investigation, an unusual phrase to describe a crash that had occurred 4 decades earlier. Whispers of a cover-up began circulating among military historians and aviation enthusiasts. Some suggested that the aircraft's modifications hinted at secret wartime technology, perhaps linked to the early radar experiments known as Operation Quiver. Others believed the aircraft might have been altered post-crash, part of a Cold War-era retrieval effort to conceal sensitive wartime innovation still classified under NATO secrecy laws. One diver, speaking anonymously in a French newspaper, recalled seeing odd equipment inside the wreckage, wiring that didn't match standard Hurricane schematics. It wasn't German, and it wasn't anything we recognized from normal RAF planes, he said. It looked like extra radio gear, more complex than a 1940 fighter should have had. For a time, the story faded again, buried under layers of bureaucracy and official silence. But within RAF veteran circles, the discovery reignited old memories. Men who had served under Townsend in 1940 began writing letters, sharing stories that had never been told. One of them, flight engineer Harold Croft, recalled hearing rumors at Martlesham Heath of a special patrol that summer and off-the-books mission testing guidance beacons. "We weren't supposed to ask questions," Croft wrote. "You did your duty, you followed orders, and you trusted that someone up the chain knew what they were doing. If the debris near Dieppe was indeed one of those hurricanes, then its recovery raised uncomfortable questions. Why had its identification been removed? Why was the find classified for decades after the war? And most pressing of all, what had those pilots really been testing that day?" In the years that followed, small clues continued to surface. A photograph from the wreck site, leaked in 1981, showed the side panel of an aircraft with a faint marking barely visible through corrosion, 85 SQ. The rest was gone, worn away by salt and time. Yet the evidence, though tantalizing, remained incomplete. Without a full serial number or pilot remains, no official confirmation could ever be made. And so the Ministry of Defense maintained its silence, issuing a brief statement. "We have no record of a number 85 Squadron aircraft lost near Dieppe during this period." But among historians, that denial said more than an admission ever could. As one aviation researcher remarked years later, when the government tells you there's nothing to see, it usually means there's something worth looking for. The channel, it seemed, was not done giving up its secrets. And behind closed doors in Whitehall, a handful of archivists were beginning to suspect that the story of the lost squadron was tied to something far bigger than a routine patrol gone wrong. The question was no longer just how the men of number 85 vanished, but why. By the 1990s, Britain had begun to peel back the layers of secrecy that had defined its wartime archives. Historians, journalists, and amateur researchers flooded the National Archives at Kew, combing through long-forgotten files from Fighter Command and the Air Ministry. It was during this wave of declassification that the name Operation Quiver surfaced again, this time linked, unmistakably, to number 85 Squadron. The first clue came from an internal Air Ministry memorandum dated October 1940, unearthed by aviation historian Margaret Ellison. The document referred cryptically to losses sustained during unauthorized coordination trials, CH system, Chainhome, Britain's experimental radar defense network. The memo went on, future tests to be conducted under strict supervision. All personnel to observe wireless silence until calibration confirmed. It didn't mention number 85 by name, but the date, August 1940, was a perfect match. Ellison pressed further. In 1993, she found a partially redacted set of orders, signed by Wing Commander Robert Lee Mallory, assigning a section of number 85 Squadron to intercept vectoring trials off the English coast. The codename written in pencil at the bottom read, Operation Quiver. What these documents revealed was that the squadron's so-called routine patrol had never been routine at all. They'd been tasked with testing a new system that combined radar tracking and radio guidance, a precursor to what modern pilots know as ground-controlled interception, GCI. If successful, it would have allowed controllers to direct fighters to targets, even in zero visibility. It was a revolutionary concept. But in August 1940, it was still in its infancy and prone to catastrophic failure. Other records added chilling details. During these early tests, pilots were ordered to switch between two frequencies mid-flight, toggling between chain-home radar guidance and standard fighter command communications. The problem was that the equipment wasn't built for such transitions. Interference was common, signals would vanish, and once contact was lost, there was no way to regain it. In one field report, dated a week before number 85 vanished, a pilot described a near-fatal malfunction. Lost contact with base, compass spin, artificial horizon unstable. Barely made it back on fuel. That report, too, was marked for internal circulation only. The tragedy of number 85 began to look less like a mystery and more like an accident of secrecy, one the government could never publicly admit. Sometimes, read a memo found in the same archive, progress demands silence. But what exactly was so secret that it had to be buried for half a century? The answer came in 1997, when another declassified file revealed a chilling connection. The project's chief engineer, a man named Dr. Henry Sutcliffe, had previously worked on a radar transmission amplifier that could interfere with enemy communications. Operation Quiver, in part, was testing whether British radar signals could jam or confuse Luftwaffe systems, effectively using radar as a weapon. If number 85 Squadron had been flying in the wrong zone or using miscalibrated frequencies, their own aircraft could have been affected by their transmissions, disorienting their instruments or knocking out their compasses altogether. That theory explained everything: the loss of communication, the sudden disappearance from radar, the lack of distress calls. The Hurricanes may have flown blind, caught between radio silence and faulty readings, until they ran out of fuel over open water. Still, the Ministry of Defense refused to confirm it. When Ellison contacted them for comment, their reply was blunt: operational quiver records remain incomplete. No conclusion can be drawn, but among those who studied the documents, few doubted the truth. In a 2001 interview, former RAF technician Frank Denning put it plainly: those boys were the test. And when the test went wrong, the easiest thing to do was pretend it never happened. The final page of the declassified file offered one last haunting note: remaining documentation sealed under Section 3 National Security Act. Review date 2070. Even now, the full story of Operation Quiver remains locked away, hidden behind redacted pages and official silence. But what has emerged paints a sobering picture of wartime desperation, of how innovation, born from necessity, can walk hand in hand with tragedy. In the words of one surviving pilot from the era, Group Captain Alan Deere, "We were the sharp end of progress. Every flight could make history, or erase it. For number 85 Squadron, that line blurred forever on a cloudy August morning over the channel." Their mission, stripped from records and buried by bureaucracy, had finally begun to surface, not as legend, but as proof that even the most advanced technology cannot outfly human cost. Yet one final mystery remained unsolved. If the aircraft off Dieppe truly belonged to them, why were their serial numbers deliberately erased? By whose hand, and for what purpose? That question would drive a new generation of researchers and divers back into the depths of the channel, hoping to find answers where the paper trail ended, in the cold silence beneath the waves. By the early 2000s, the story of number 85 Squadron had become a haunting legend among military historians, divers, and aviation enthusiasts alike. Countless expeditions ventured into the depths of the English Channel, searching for traces of the 6 hurricanes lost in 1940. Some found scattered metal fragments. Others claimed sonar images that suggested intact wrecks. Yet every discovery raised as many questions as it answered. In 2004, a British-French archaeological team led by marine historian Paul Devereux launched Project Valiant, a coordinated search using side-scan sonar and magnetometer mapping. Over several weeks, they identified 3 distinct debris fields lying between the Sussex coast and Dieppe. One of them, codenamed Site Delta, produced unmistakable signals of aircraft alloy consistent with early war hurricanes. The team's excitement was tempered by caution. "We may have found them," Devereux told the BBC, "but identifying who they were and why they were there will take far longer." Divers descended on Site Delta later that summer. What they found was eerie in its preservation. A twisted propeller, the remnants of a cockpit frame, and the ghostly outline of RAF roundels barely visible through decades of corrosion. But once again, the identification plate had been deliberately removed. Every serial number, every manufacturing stamp, gone. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase the aircraft's identity. When Devereux submitted his findings to the Ministry of Defense, the response was polite but firm: no further comment. The wrecks were declared protected military graves, ending further excavation. To Devereux and his team, it felt like a final barrier, one that protected not just the resting place of airmen, but a secret the government still wasn't ready to confront. Among those who followed the story, one question lingered: why? Why would the RAF or Ministry of Defense still hide details of a mission more than 60 years old? Declassified correspondence suggested that some components of Operation Quiver's technology had influenced post-war radar and even Cold War electronic warfare systems. To reveal the full nature of the experiment might expose technologies that evolved into classified modern applications. The secrecy, it seemed, was generational, passed down through bureaucratic habit and national security inertia. For the families of the lost airmen, however, the mystery was more personal. In 2005, descendants of squadron leader Peter Townsend's men gathered at Martlesham Heath to dedicate a memorial stone. The inscription read simply: "To those who flew into the Channel and did not return. Their courage endures." No mention of Operation Quiver, no speculation, no blame, just quiet remembrance. The ceremony was small, but those who attended described a palpable sense of closure. Yet even in the calm of that day, unanswered questions hovered like mist over the airfield. In his final interview before his death, Devereux reflected, "I think they were part of something bigger, something meant to change the war. They flew into secrecy, not by choice but by duty." That's what makes it tragic, and that's what makes it noble. Modern aviation archaeologists continue to explore the channel, guided by sonar, history, and hope. Each year, new fragments surface, shards of propellers, cockpit glass, ammunition casings. None have yet provided absolute proof, but together they form a mosaic of remembrance, a reminder that history's greatest mysteries often hide in plain sight, just beneath the waves. Today, the story of No. 85 Squadron stands as more than a wartime mystery. It's a reflection on the cost of progress and the fragility of human endurance under pressure. In an age driven by innovation, their loss reminds us that every technological leap is built on courage and sometimes on sacrifice unseen. As one surviving pilot from the Battle of Britain later wrote, "We didn't think of ourselves as heroes. We were just doing our part." But history remembers us for the flights we never finished. And so, the legend endures, 6 hurricanes that vanished into cloud and sea, and a question that still echoes over the channel. Were they lost to weather, to failure, or to a secret Britain could never tell? The waves keep their silence, rolling endlessly over the place where progress and tragedy met. The mystery of the lost RAF squadron remains unsolved, but never forgotten.